I guess maybe most people say this about their city, but New York City, there is something, particularly in those periods, right? The 70s, which you and were too young to be here, but the 80s and the 90s.
Incredible.
Incredible, and just the transformation.
Yes.
You know, all of the, or if you think from like a cultural standpoint, like think fashion, think art, what was happening in the 80s. Explosive, and what came out of that in terms of the art, in terms of, you know, fashion, in terms of design. And then the 90s, think about music.
Yes.
I mean, hip hop, end of the 80s, 90s, the club scene.
I mean, untouchable.
Yeah.
Unparalleled. Like when I think about it, this year I read an interesting article, and I think I say it all the time, and I think it was Rolling Stones, and they refer to hip hop and hip hop culture as the franca lingua of culture. And I was just like, when I was growing up, you could totally get arrested for wearing any of the attire that was associated with the music.
Yeah.
And, you know, and if you were into the culture, you were definitely made to feel like you were not mainstream. And now,
yeah, it felt sort of renegade back then.
Yeah,
It hadn't kind of hit the commercial level. You know, it hadn't been subsumed by sort of the commercial aspect of it. So it felt really.
And it was great.
Yeah,
Karis, like starting with Karis, because that's what we might have been listening to.
Exactly.
In junior high and high.
Quest, Africa Bambaataa.
It was excellent.
Amazing. And actually, when I came, so I started coming to New York in my early teens to do dance summer intensives, and I would come with one or two other friends, and we would stay in an apartment by ourselves, but there would always be an adult from, you know, connected to one of our families that would come and check up on us. But New York City was so like just raw, and everything was out on the surface. All the creativity and the mess and the spark it was just incredible, so magical. And there's a nostalgia for it. Obviously, life wasn't perfect for everybody, but and then the music scene, when I came out, so I came out at 18 for college, and I hit right at the end of the kind of 80s, 90s club scene and the music scene. KRS. So I remember KRS-One, Tribe, Called Quest, all of that.
Conscious hip hop.
Exactly.
I always think, and I always say, as raw as it was, we're here and we're alive and we're safe, and I think that's really incredible, because it was a rough time. Mm-hmm. But like I felt safe as a teenager, like taking the coach van bus from Nyack, New York, into 42nd Street, and just like walking around. My place was the West Village. Like I used to go to West Village, and I had like enough money to have a slice of pizza, and then just, if I had gotten paid for my part-time job, I would like buy a pair of vintage jeans or like Doc Martens.
What was that antique boutique? Remember on Broadway here, right? Kind of in Canal Jean Company.
Yes, I mean those were.
I used to love that. I think I still have some of the buttons. You know, those little buttons that say Canal, like in bright neon.
Yeah, good times. Good times.
Yeah, really amazing. And it was an incredible place for me as a creative, as a dancer.
Yes.
Because everything was just so free-flowing. We used to kind of hang out in these groups of dancers. You can think Fame. Remember the movie Fame?
Yes.
That's sort of what it felt like. And so if we weren't, I started at School of American Ballet, but we would take classes at Alvin Ailey. We would go to Steps.
Amazing.
There are all these kind of funky studios, and you followed different teachers, well-known teachers. And then you would hang out in the park or in the West Village, and someone would decide to just sort of bust out on the street with,
a mix of what you were studying.
It's just magical.
And so you were taking that energy in already, and it was like already in your psyche. It was already in your bank of references.
Yeah, totally.
And so then you danced professionally, and then your interest in art sparked, and then you became, an expert in art. You did your PhD in art. And then you became a curator, a director, and then today you are in leadership at the New Museum. Meanwhile, you've done grand exhibitions all over the world and did spectacular programming for iconic centers. You know, you have the center downtown, the Oculus, where and then you did the Peninsula project in Hong Kong. How do you feel today? What is exciting you? when it comes to what our art is communicating to the public. Like, how do you feel about this moment and the communication that's taking place?
It's so funny because we started talking almost just sort of going back in time. And, my dance, kind of history in dance, and, my love of New York and just generally cities around the world, I think is really tied to my interest in contemporary art, because I love being around artists, being around creatives. I really believe artists kind of live in and see the world really differently. And they move through the world differently. They're always sort of looking at things. It's like a menu, right? So they're just culling and pulling ideas from everything around them. And that really resonates for me, I think, as a former dancer. And I think, so if you and I just started Tamu in the 80s, then you go to the 90s. And one of the biggest things right now that really strikes me is, we're in this really historical, critical moment. And I think, for our parents or grandparents, they can probably look back and sort of say a similar thing, that there was a particular moment. Like for our parents, it may have been the 60s, right? Or your family, you have family in Jamaica, I have family in East Africa, the 60s, not only in terms of civil rights, but also the kind of colonial to post-colonial moment. And for me, in these last couple years, and I have always gravitated towards artists and work that really is conceptual and has something to say. Beauty is amazing, and aesthetics, obviously, that's sort of what pulls you in. But I am really interested in artists who see themselves as part of the world and who just use their art, either consciously or sort of subconsciously, to comment, engage, and challenge some of the, social, political, economic, issues that we're dealing with. And so for me, generally, those artists have tended to be artists who have been historically excluded. Black artists, LGBTQI plus artists, Asian artists, women. So if you pull all of that into this moment, I feel almost a little hesitant to say we're coming out of a pandemic. Maybe
Yes,
we
sure,
are, but
yes.
the world is at different stages with it. And depending on where you are socioeconomically, you are also at different stages with it. But I think between the pandemic, in this particular country, thinking about the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, thinking about the rise in Asian hate and crimes towards Asians. The new museum is down here on the Bowery, and we're very much linked to Chinatown and many of those communities, so that's been very top of mind. So when you think about that, and then you look at the art world, and specifically in New York, it's kind of unprecedented what we're seeing right now. There are more Black artists of color that I think are more visible in this moment. More artists represented by galleries, more of these artists having exhibitions. Right now, we have an incredible exhibition up at the museum by a 91-year-old Harlem-born artist, Faith Ringgold.
Yes,
who is
so exciting.
A legend. You have to come by.
I will.
Absolutely. Legend. 91 years old.
And
prolific.
epic. She's epic.
Prolific. This woman has been creating art since the 1960s. And
She
she's
looks
just
great, by the
now,
way.
she's amazing. She showed up at the opening with, like, I don't know if they were limited edition, but these sequined Uggs. And everyone was just like, where did this woman get these boots? But it's really unprecedented. And I do feel that there is a shift. So that's sort of what we see. But I think for me, as deputy director at the museum, someone who's in leadership, I also think that we're seeing shifts behind the scenes. And that's really where the lasting change comes. Sometimes we can talk about window dressing, or we can talk about a company. And I know you probably think about this even in fashion, that kind of gives good face. But, then you and I want to know, well, what does your boardroom look like?
Yes.
How many women are on the board?
Yes.
Right? How many people of color are on the board? But I think we're starting to see some of those big shifts in the art world, in places of power and in places where decisions are being made. And so for me, that's really exciting. But I always, I'm always like hesitant to rest on our laurels or pat ourselves on the back, because there's always work to be done. And I have a daughter, you have a son, we have friends that have other children, younger children, and that work to be done is not only for us, but more importantly for them.
Yes.
Right?
We talk about this a lot because we talk about how we can continue the work and continue to move forward. And I feel that a lot of the people that I've spoken to, they understand and they realize that while we make this progress, while the seeds are planted and maybe they're under the surface of the soil, we still can't rest because we have to usher the flowers, we have to usher them out of the soil.
Right.
And that's going to take a long time.
Right.
And it's going to take a lot of monitoring. It's going to take a lot of tending to. Mm-hmm. And so I'm happy to see that a lot of our generation and a lot of the thought makers and leaders globally are thinking in the same way, mm-hmm. that they're not satisfied with the gains that we've made thus mm-hmm. far, that they have a long game, they have a long
Absolutely.
vision. So that's wonderful. So I've been listening to your story and how you have made it thus far to being in leadership, and I want to talk about your process, and I want to mm-hmm. talk about what are the fundamentals that you may have gained through your family, through your past experience, through your ancestors that lead you in the decisions that you make, that lead you to see the world mm-hmm. in which you see it, the way you see it. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk to us about that?
Sure. I mean, you say friends and family. Friends and family to me are everything. I come from 2 immigrant parents, and I have a younger brother who's probably twice my size at this point, but I still think of him as my baby brother, Quito. And so, I grew up in a family, we did not have a lot, but we had enough. My parents were incredibly hardworking, both of them, very, very hardworking, and really kind of instilled in us that work ethic and the idea that there's no work that's beneath you. So I remember very distinctly at one point, even when my father had just finished college, we needed extra money, so he worked at a 7-Eleven, or it was called Stop and Go, like 2 or 3 nights a week.
Yes.
With a college degree.
Yes.
But it was about, putting food on the table yes. and making sure that we got the swim lessons and the yes. soccer and the tutoring or whatever it is that we wanted. They were very political. So I remember probably when I was about 6 or 7, and I was with my mother and my brother, and we were in a park, and it was sort of the first time I had seen someone who was unsheltered, and I like that word as opposed to homeless because it puts the onus on the system, right, when we say unsheltered. And my brother and I kept staring, and my mother turned to us and she said, Isolde, that's somebody's child. And, and it could have been somebody's mother, it could have been, it was a woman, but it just humanized things. And the reason I like that story is because compassion was incredibly important, and empathy, I think, for my parents and my family, to not judge people. And, so all of those qualities, I bring them up because I feel like I really value them, and I try to sort of live them. Yeah, so I really value those. And when I think about, how I try to engage with people, I always try to keep those kind of values top of mind. And even fast forward, Tamu, to now in terms of like leading and leadership, I'm really, really interested in leadership and thinking about, in particular, how women lead and can lead. And what it means not necessarily to be a leader now, but a leader for the future. Oh. And I think, as cheesy as it sounds, I really think that you can lead with love and joy.
There's
it doesn't
no
always.
Here. You're with the wrong person. I have hearts in my eyes all day long.
Oh, yeah, no, I do. I know, which is why there's a sort of kindred spirit element with you and me. But I think you can lead and live with joy and love. It doesn't have to be with an iron fist. I think my approach. I think laughter is incredibly important. So I'm one of those folks, where I'll hold a meeting at the museum and I think they're fabulous jokes. Some people may think they're corny, but we spend a lot of our time working. So if you don't have some joy while you're doing it, we're in big trouble. And really interested in people. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's people over projects and people over profits, because if you don't take care of people and see people and value them and empower them and give them a platform that you can partner with them on to sort of do what they do at their very best, your results are never going to be what they are. But I really believe that when you take care of people, right, whatever it is that they're doing or creating or wanting to put out in the world, I think will be that much better. So I sort of tie that where I am right now very much to my upbringing, you know, where I just, the words I used to hear constantly were sort of empathy, compassion, humility. You know, like, so when you had a success, it was celebrated, but you know, it didn't need to be celebrated for months and months in my household. You know, so the element of humility, I think, was really important, and kindness, all of those things. Those are just so important, you know, to me. And I think, you know, as a parent, I try to instill those values, like in my daughter Farah, you know, looking at people with kindness and being humble and recognizing that unless you've walked in somebody's shoes, we'll never know kind of how they feel or what they've experienced. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like those are principles that are they're grounded, and they ground you in leading your life. And you know, I always feel very strongly that we're here and we're so blessed to be here, and we're all connected in such a profound way that if we're not contributing something positive to our time here, then we're not really fulfilling our purpose. Now, I don't know what my end purpose is. I'm on that journey, but I just kind of feel like it would be useless not to be in this world in that way, you know. And I really adore the fact that you think about your leadership and you think about the work that you're doing in the future, and it's the world that you want to see, so that you are already, you know, working and imagining that world, and you're already laying the foundation that's going to be needed to achieve, you know, what Farah needs, you know, what, you know, our friend Anya's Matilda needs, what my son needs. And I think that is a way of saying that we're here today, but what we're leaving is definitely going to be better. You know,
it's so interesting. You talked about, you know, the seeds and how you sort of usher, you know, the plants or the flowers into the world, but then there's that element of who's sustaining them, right? So like when they come into the world, what are we doing? You know, what are we putting out in the universe? What systems, you know, for lack of a better term, are we putting in place to sustain them, right? And that's really about the future. So, for example, when we think about, you know, how we're working now, you know, so many of us are hybrid, or we're not going to the office, which I love. I mean, I actually go into the museum about twice a week, and then I can work from home or wherever I need to be. I really enjoy this flexibility. But thinking about future generations, right? So thinking about your son or my daughter or our friend Anya's daughter, how are they going to work? Because it's not going, I can just say, having taught 18 to 22-year-olds as a professor at NYU, they are not about the grind in the same way that we are, and probably even more so the generation before us. So please. The grind, you know, this is a very like maybe millennial, maybe even Gen Z kind of idea, that, you know, that it's less about just grinding, going to work and just putting in the hours and not leaving before your boss leaves, and, you know, everything else goes by the wayside. And I think it's about, in a way, working smarter, right? So, and prioritizing self and self-care. I'm always so blown away, especially by young people your son's age and a little bit older, in terms of how they're very much learning how to prioritize themselves as human beings. You know, and it doesn't even faze them and some people, you know, find it maybe problematic, but that they would leave before you, their boss, because they have to go get do a soul cycle class, or, you know, that's them sort of prioritizing their well-being. So we're working differently now, but I also think in the future it's going to look very, very different. I think it's important.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of friends who are in our generation or who are, our peers, and we talk about this very often, and we want to be fair. I mean, I come from a background where that didn't exist. Like even to just pay off my student loans, I used to work 8 to 1 and repeat. 7 days a week. And that's what I had to do. And obviously, I'm an immigrant and my mother is an immigrant, and like the grind, that was a different kind of grind because I worked 8 to 1, but she worked maybe 8 to 8 regularly.
Or had 2 jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was 8 to 8, because then after she worked, then, afterwards too, maybe there's a 3-hour break. And the things that, this generation requires now is very different from, what I am familiar with, and I'm not that far away from them. But wanting to be fair, wanting not to fall into a space where you have to be like, well, no, I'm your boss and I'm staying, you should stay with me. Wanting to be, understanding, wanting to be gracious, wanting to be all of those things, but wanting to also have boundaries that work for the business. Like, what is a piece of advice you can give to us fellow leaders that are grappling with these issues or these situations? Let's just call them situations, because they're not like issues.
I think situations probably makes more sense. And I think so there are a couple things. It's on the one hand exactly what you said, and then I do think that sometimes for some of the younger generations there's a disconnect or sort of a lack of history, right? To the point where what allows us to do what we did is also sort of very much resting on the shoulders of giants, resting on the shoulders of our parents, right? Who actually did do, if you want to call it the grind or whatever you want it, I don't know what my dad was doing, but they worked all the time. And so I don't want to like poo-poo that either. That's actually what allows me to be in part where I am, today. I think, and there's tons of articles, Tamu, floating around around like, companies and leaders and, oh my gosh, what do you do with these Gen Z folks and the millennials, and how do you, listen? When I came on board at the new museum, I had one-on-ones I spent my first 6 months. I did a lot of listening and observing, and I had one-on-ones with people to really just get a sense of who they are, how they saw their jobs, because it's very different when you read a job description versus when you sit and you talk with somebody about how they see their job, right? What the challenges are, what things they liked about their work. So the listening piece and taking in that information, I think, is really important. And then also not being so wedded to, but this is what we've been doing for 10 years.
Yes.
That's like my favorite thing when I say, maybe we should try that. Oh, no, we've been doing, and this isn't even just at the museum, but we're all as humans, many of us ingrained. Oh, no, we've been doing it this way for 10 years. And it's sort of like, well, that's great. And everyone hears my little phrase, if you do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So how about if we try something different, a little bit different? And guess what? Good to know you have this thing that you've been doing for 10 years. So if the different thing doesn't work, we can go back to that.
Yes.
Change is hard, and change management is hard. Like, anywhere you are. It could be, on a set. It could be at a company. It could be at a sports team, where someone comes in and just says, hey, we're going to try this new form of conditioning. And the athletes are like, what? That's not what we do in basketball, or that's not. Being open to change and figuring out ways to create points of entry to invite people into that change, I think is really important and really hard. Yeah. I am finding out it's really, really hard. But, that's how we move forward.
And that's it, because the change is inevitable, and we have to actually accept it to reduce the friction, because I'm personally not about the friction for
100%.
Long periods of time.
Yeah,
I'll accept some friction, but we need to get past the friction so we can create,
Yeah, and we don't want things to be exactly as they were.
Yeah.
The whole point of humanity and being human beings is to evolve, and hopefully evolve for the better in a way that makes the world more beautiful and bigger and better for more people.
Yes.
So, this idea of, I always say, like, well, no one wants to read a book with one chapter. Like you want to keep adding I guess maybe, or like if you have the cliff notes or something, but you want to keep adding chapters, to your story. And that requires transition and change, which is really uncomfortable. But once you push through, it's like, oh my gosh, it opens up a whole other story, for you, which is so important.
So important. And, it makes me think of, the discipline that you contributed to in your journey, the different chapters in your journey. Today, you are an absolute luminary in the arts. You are a role model. You inspire so many people. And the art world itself, while it has progressed, it is still very much so white dominated field, and even much more so white male dominated, and today, as after this pandemic, we've lived through this pandemic, we've lived through the heartbreaking, murder of George Floyd. So many promises were made by huge stakeholders in the art world. And where are you seeing those promises being delivered right now? Are you seeing them delivered? Like, what's the most promising programs that are being implemented?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think for me, and change is slow, but I think we're seeing it in terms of hiring. So, I'm going to be very New York centric, although I am very global in my sort of existence and thinking. But if you look at the New York museums and institutions, you're seeing more diverse hires, which is great. And most importantly, you're seeing more diverse hires at the the leadership level, the kind of executive level. And that's really important because those are the folks that are sort of the gatekeepers and that make decisions, right? I have charged myself for anybody that I'm hiring, just in my mind, and obviously I can't sort of, make this proclamation, in the hiring process, but I was put here for a reason. So I really believe that if it's in my power and I have incredibly qualified candidates who happen to be women or happen to be Black or Asian, or what, I will give them very, very serious attention. Because I want our teams to look like the world, and more specifically the city in which we live in. New York City is 54% people of color, right? We forget that. We're actually not in the minority here in the city. So it's very important because museums exist. Artists make work to be seen and to be out in the world. Museums exist as platforms for artists and that art. And so we really want as many different kinds of people coming through the doors. And we really want to be able to engage with different, communities. Everything from language, culture. I mean, one of the first things I did when I came on board, I was like, I wonder what languages, are spoken here. So we have Spanish. I was like, wow, this is interesting because we're so close to Chinatown. We don't have anyone that speaks Chinese. I mean, I have a tiny, tiny bit of Mandarin, enough to greet people so that they don't think I'm rude. But, those are things that we want to shift, right? Because that's about community and audience. So I think there's a greater awareness of that. I think we are seeing hires, I mean, myself included, coming in higher level positions that can really have, an impact, have the ability to make change. And then I think the biggest thing, and this is across the board, it's probably similar for you, Tamu, in fashion too, is, systems have to change. It's not enough to bring in a Black woman and have her lead if the system was sort of set up, predicated on her absence. Right?
Yes.
So the system itself has to change. It has to sort of stop existing in the way it was, which was primarily oriented towards white men. Yes. Right? So that's a slower burn. Yeah. Trying to make that kind of a change is a slower burn, but it starts again at the top level. Like, what do your boards look like? Your board of trustees, right? So we've been working really hard at the new museum. Other museums have been trying to, really diversify their leadership as well. And then of course artists, but I think we're probably doing a bit better in terms of representation in artists.
What can we do as the public? Like, I'm a member of the public. What can I do to maybe hold the industry accountable for sustaining the promises that they've made and fulfilling ones that are yet to be made?
That's such a good question. I think, well, definitely come to museums, everybody. We're bouncing back, but culture in general took a huge hit, and not even just in New York. I mean, in Rome, and during the lockdown of the pandemic, museums, other cultural institutions were not open, which means that they were not generating income. There were no tickets.
Yes.
And we have to remember, most museums, it's different, I think, in Europe, but the way we're funded here as nonprofits. So come visit, come see art, buy a ticket, and if it's a donate only, even give $1 or $2, it really helps. I think for the public, for you as the public, being vocal about, if you like something, to say this show was really amazing and we'd love to see more exhibitions like this, because there are always comment boxes, or you can send like an email for a suggestion. Being vocal, or saying, I had this kind of an experience at the museum and it was really uncomfortable, and because we need to know that. Which we've had emails, to that degree. If you speak another language and you come to a museum and it's hard to orient yourself because there's no one that speaks Arabic or Mandarin, or, let us know that that's really important. Or say if you are hearing impaired, right? That's something in terms of issues around equity, diversity and equity, but also accessibility, right? That's something now that's coming top of mind. Like, wow, this is a great exhibition, but if you're in a wheelchair, how would you even get in the door and maneuver around? Or you're watching the video on headsets, but if you can't hear, how do you enjoy this work of art? Right? Is there, do we think about signing? Do we think about, so just being vocal, because these institutions are for you. This art is for all of you. Letting us know what you like, and also, what you don't like, or what makes it uncomfortable, is, for me, somebody who's very oriented towards people and audiences, super helpful. You have to have a bit of a thick skin, because sometimes people really come at you, but
I can only imagine.
It's super helpful. So just being really vocal. And then, it's similar to fashion or, big tech. If you really don't like something, or if something is really, offensive or problematic, don't put your money there.
Yes.
If you don't like what a particular brand stands for, or a particular ad campaign, and we don't need to mention names, but this has happened over the last 5 years, why go out and buy the sneakers?
Yes.
Right? I mean, back in the day of our parents boycotting, and I'm not advocating that, but it had a huge economic effect. And I think we forget, as people, we have a lot of power.
Yes.
If you decide not to buy bananas from Ecuador because of unfair labor practices, you'd be amazed at how quickly those labor practices shift if people stop buying those bananas, right? I mean, that's like major power, I think, and we forget that. And I think actually younger generations are starting to really recognize that, almost more so than our generations, right? Because we're sort of post-civil rights babies.
Yes,
but
we lived in that kind of like complacency.
A little bit, but I think we also, like, our parents' generation did so much of that work, and so then we kind of, our generation contended with, and I say this to all young people, we contended with other issues. We contended with AIDS. I mean, HIV/AIDS and the AIDS crisis came about during our youth.
Our formative youth,
right? Absolutely. The crack epidemic, which was huge in a city like New York. I mean, you saw it came and tore through within 1 year. You could see a difference. So
and those are people's parents now.
Exactly. So I think every generation is contending. The one thing I would say for the younger generations today that we did not have as a deep awareness of, which is kind of a shame, is the environment. It was still deteriorating as we were coming up, but it's obviously accelerated. And that is something that every generation going forward now will have to contend with. But there's always going to be, issues, and it's really inspiring to see, at least in my field, art and artists and kind of cultural workers coming around to, galvanizing to kind of address some of those issues.
So one of the exciting things that I've learned about you is, as you know, as your journey progressed, as you grew professionally, you also became a mother, and 12 years of that growth you've spent with amazing Farah. How has your perspective and your processes changed while living with her? While, I guess, because I felt like a superhero when I had my son. Like, I just felt like incredible, and the way that he really affected my life, and like kind of getting a reset to look at the world again was really impactful and important for me. How has it affected you?
Motherhood. I mean, it is, I always say it's a juggle and a joy.
Yes.
Right. So the juggle piece, I think with regards to my work, I have become so meticulous on time management. And I think, and I know our friend Anya agrees with this, all of our friends, I'm sure you, the amount of work and stuff that I get done between 9 and 5 is like tenfold. And probably some people, and I know probably this happens to you, are sort of like, well, how do you do all of that? Because you realize when your kid gets home, and he or she's got to eat. And then, my child's at the stage where she wants to kind of tell me about her day, or, this happened in school. Like, you have to be super present. I say, like, I turn into like a mama pumpkin, instead of Cinderella. So that piece in terms of my just time management and productivity, boundaries, she's really helped me set up boundaries. So I turn my phone off 6:30 sharp. I always turn it on vibrate so that I can spend, she goes to bed, 8:39, so I can really spend good time with her and plug in. And also humility. We started the conversation talking about being humble, and I think having Farah, having a child is very humbling, because there's no playbook.
No.
And just when you think something is working, it doesn't.
How'd it go?
It doesn't. Being, this idea of being much more mindful and listening, right? I think there's this idea that parenting is always getting in there and do this and that. But so much of it, especially as they get older, is really just being mindful and listening.
Yes.
Listening. That's like active listening, being a parent, as opposed to getting and saying, do this or don't forget that, or, it's like the listening piece.
There are a lot of pieces that they're dropping that you need to be formulating for them.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel, and it's also just a joy. It's a joy to like go out, in the city with her and kind of look at the city through her eyes, or like her and her friends, the things that are really important, to her. It might be, she's not on TikTok yet. She just got a phone. But it might be,
got his phone at 12
yeah, just got a phone. She had to sign a phone contract that went with it. So far so good. But just, her showing me things that are important to her, and instead of me saying, okay, just like there are moments where I say, okay, you know what? I'm going to just put this down. I say, Farah, I have 10 minutes before I go back to this, and then I'll sit and look. And it's just incredibly meaningful for her.
Oh, yes.
Oof.
Well, that Anya, our friend who we talk about,
who we love.
This week, she and I were having a conversation, and she was like, at the heart of it, we as human beings, we want to be seen. So at an important age like that, when they already think the world is not seeing them, because I think that's a part of their growth, right? They are trying to assert themselves.
Totally.
I think it's so important for us to take a piece of this advice and be mindful, so that we can show, yes, I'm looking at what you're showing me because it's important to you, therefore it's important to me. And I think that can change, especially because they're so unsure. My son has pimples now. It's like a thing, like
Pimples.
he's 14, but he's 6'3". So it's like, how do I control this body?
That
is like,
and the big feet. And
So there's all that uncertainty and all that change for them. Whereas I feel like being seen can pull it in,
Being seen, being heard, having your concerns, as small as they may seem to us, having your concerns validated, because, for a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 14-year-old, something that may seem sort of insignificant It's really huge.
Huge.
It's really huge.
Huge.
So that piece is, and that's constant. And I don't always get it right.
Oh, we don't.
No,
That's the
I
first
don't always
thing,
get
yeah.
it right. And people are like, oh, and I'm like, if you don't believe me, I can bring her here and she will tell you I don't always get it right. She'll be like, this, Mom. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh,
It's such a joy. And I really feel lucky to be in New York. I have such a great community, like my chosen family. People like Cynthia and, Esmeralda, all of these incredible women, who are moms and they're aunties to my daughter.
Yes.
If I need to, oh my gosh, I've got to run to the museum, and then one of them will take her for a couple of hours. And I mean, that piece, it takes a village, right?
Yes.
That quote, which we hear over and over, and it's so true. And I think the cultures that we come from, that is actually the case, right?
Yes.
Where the kids in so many ways are sort of raised by their community. So yeah, it's a wonderful, beautiful, at times stressful thing.
Yes, because they're whole human beings.
They are.
I always try to remind myself when my son is having a bad day, I'm like, yeah, I'll get up. I'll be moody. I mean, I won't be, hopefully I don't take it out on anyone. If it's not at the airport, I won't take it out on them.
Mm-hmm.
That's my weak spot. But it's like they're learning to control all of that,
Totally.
And it's amazing that they contain it so well for their young age. So we have made it this far. We're here today. It's spring 2022. I think we've done pretty well, surviving this major health crisis that is evolving every day. I think that we have really worked hard to make sure that social justice is on the top of everyone's mind, as well as sustainability. How have you managed to take care of yourself, to stay grounded, to stay positive, to stay resilient during this time? Because your work is very impactful of a whole community that's a very, very sensitive community, and you're advocating for them, you're getting their work seen, you're getting their projects realized, and you're building for the future. So how do you get up knowing what you fought for, knowing what you've created, knowing the connections that you have made? How do you maintain your drive? How do you keep marching ahead?
I mean, that goes back, I think, to self-care. For me, I think having boundaries is really important. I'm really big on boundaries, or maybe a kind of gentler term would be guardrails. So I know when I hit my limit. I know that privacy is very important to me. I know when I'm engaging with someone and what they're saying is not okay. Those sort of things I think are really important. So, I am really big on nature. I'm originally from Seattle, so I spend a lot of time, I live in Brooklyn, I spend a lot of time in the park. I was there this morning. Because I think my professional life is so social. I do value solitude, and I think some of my best sort of decompressing and sort of recuperative work is done kind of in solitude and in the park, or near the water. I mean, if I could live I'm definitely an island person. If I could live by the beach and do what I do, I would do it in a minute. So knowing what I need to kind of recoup, I think, is really important. And as I've gotten older, I've become much more kind of tapped into that. And then, yeah, I think, definitely going on news fast, which is a very privileged thing. I recognize that I can do when some people are in the middle of deep crisis and violence right now. I try very hard to be mindful of how much of it I take in. Also, a part of it's because I'm deeply affected by it. And it can be obviously very stressful. I think it's really important. You said earlier, Tamu, that we're living for a purpose, or maybe multiple purposes, probably. And so I definitely value the work that I do outside of the art world. I'm on the board of the Women's Prison Association, and criminal justice reform is deeply, deeply important to me. The Women's Prison Association, it's called WPA, is an organization that works with women who have come out of prison to reunite them. 85% of women in prison are mothers. Most of them are there for very small, petty, nonviolent offenses. So it's an organization that really works with them to kind of help them, partners with them, right, to help them get back on their feet, reunite with their children, jobs, housing. And I feel really, really passionate about this work, and that's something that brings me a lot of joy. I think also keeps me grounded. And then just spending time with loved ones. You know, there's a friend of mine said to me the other day, you know, I don't know if I'm all that crazy about making all these new friends. I feel like I'm at a time where I really want to plug into the friends or people that I know and make those connections deeper. And I thought it was interesting. She didn't mean it in sort of a negative way,
no.
but it's kind of amazing. Like you and I have been connecting and then we're on virtual or whatever, but like what a joy to spend time like really plugging in. And
I appreciate that
100%, right? Yeah. Especially in the fields I think that we exist in, where you're always kind of circulating and smiling and, you know, to have those moments with loved ones where you can just, you know, kick off your shoes, have a glass of wine, the kids are running around. It's so nice.
It's really hard to also balance your friendships. Like this weekend, when I go home to Italy, my childhood friend is coming to stay with me. But it's kind of like, you know, in definitely in fashion, I make new friends. I mean, I make new friends if I walk outside because I just want to make friends. But it's like, why am I not taking care of my relationships with people who, I mean, the love is unreal. Yeah. Like the love is unreal. The love that these people and the patience they've had with me, particularly because I am that person to make new friends all the time.
I am too, actually, but I get what she's saying.
No, it totally resonates with me. And the past, even for a few years now, I've been really investing in older friendships or like making that phone call, having that list of people that you call for the holidays. And you know, I'm bad. I leave voice messages because like I can't see the phone, like just something happens. I can't and I could do all these like spelling errors. So now I'm just leaving voice message. But even if it's a voice message, I love my new friends and I love making new friends, but there's something about reconnecting, making sure that they're okay. The other thing is we're only here for a finite amount of time.
Exactly.
Like, you know, we're not going to see these people, you know, we're young because we've got a lot of time. We have a lot. We're hot girls in the prime of our, but,
young,
you know,
sprightly
things, but like, you know, the time is a thing, you know?
It is.
And we could be having a lot of fun with those people.
Yeah, no,
so
it is.
That completely resonates with me.
And it just feels so good to kind of connect with people, especially in this moment now where we're all sort of now coming out of you know, different stages of the pandemic and able to see people in person and everything. So joy.
I hope in 10 years you're going to meet me somewhere in Tuscany.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And we'll make cacio e pepe together.
No, let's see, you know. Yeah, you could make cacio e pepe there. There in Tuscany, Papa al Pomodoro.
Oh, with all the fresh tomatoes.
Yes,
and oh my gosh,
that's what we're gonna
amazing.
make. So we have a date.
We have a date.